At 8:47 on the night of my 67th birthday, my son finally texted me. But he didn't say happy birthday. "Dad, this is exactly what we mean. We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore at all." I stared at Ryan's message while the little grocery store cake I'd bought for myself sat untouched across the table. Then something appeared beneath his text. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, had reacted with a thumbs up. That hurt almost more than Ryan's words. Other relatives had seen the exchange too. Nobody defended me. Nobody even asked if I was okay. I started typing. Deleted it. Started again. Deleted that too. Then I realized something. Ryan wasn't asking me a question. He was establishing a boundary. So I answered with 2 sentences. Understood, I'll respect that. And then I decided to respect it completely. My name is Gilbert Lawson. I spent most of my adult life building a regional construction supply company, and after my wife died, Ryan became the closest family I had left. Maybe that was why I tolerated more than I should have. That morning, I had expected a call from him. By lunchtime, I told myself he was busy. By dinner, I was making excuses for Melissa too. But when neither of them, nor my grandchildren contacted me, I finally wrote in our family group chat. "I guess everyone got busy today. I won't pretend I'm not a little sad nobody remembered my birthday." Ryan answered within minutes. Apparently, he hadn't been too busy to see my message. He simply didn't want to hear from me. So after sending my reply, I blocked Ryan's number. Then Melissa's. Then I removed myself from the family group. I didn't threaten them. I didn't demand to see my grandchildren. I didn't tell Ryan he would regret what he had written. Instead, I walked back to the dining table, closed the box around my untouched birthday cake, and opened my laptop. There was something Ryan apparently hadn't considered when he told me to stop participating in his life. I opened the latest statement for the Lawson Family Trust. Mortgage support. Vehicle lease. Private school contribution. Monthly household distribution. Nearly $14,000 every month was flowing toward Ryan and Melissa's household because I had authorized it. They wanted distance from me, but apparently not from the life my money provided. I picked up my phone and called Charles Mercer, the attorney who had handled my trust affairs for years. "Charles," I said when he answered, "I need to see you tomorrow morning." "Is something wrong?" I looked at Ryan's payments on the screen. "I need you to tell me exactly which of these payments I'm legally obligated to make." There was a pause. "And the others?" I closed the statement. "That depends on your answer." Because if my son wanted me completely out of his life, there was one question neither Ryan nor Melissa seemed to have asked. Why was I still expected to finance it? Charles was already waiting when I entered his office the next morning. I put the trust statement on his desk. "I want 2 categories," I said. "What belongs to Ryan legally, and what am I giving him because I choose to?" Charles studied me for a moment. "Something happened. My son asked me not to contact him anymore." Charles leaned back. "And you're considering changing the distributions?" "I'm considering respecting his decision." He opened the trust documents. "We started with my grandchildren." "The education accounts are protected," Charles explained. "They're separate. Whatever happens between you and Ryan doesn't affect them." "Good, those stay exactly as they are." Then Charles turned to Ryan and Melissa's household payments. Mortgage assistance. Vehicle lease. Monthly living allowance. Several additional expenses I had approved over the years. Charles tapped the page. "These are discretionary, Gilbert. You're under no obligation to continue them." That answer forced me to confront something uncomfortable. Whenever Ryan complained about money, I helped. Whenever he became distant, I helped more. Once, after Melissa accused me of being too involved in their lives, I stopped visiting without an invitation. 3 weeks later, Ryan called asking whether I could increase their monthly distribution because expenses had gone up. I agreed. Melissa had complained before that I used money to stay involved. Yet neither of them had ever declined a payment. Charles knew the pattern. You've increased these distributions several times. I thought I was helping my family. Do you want me to terminate everything? Not everything. Nothing belonging to the children changes. I pushed the household statement toward him. But anything Ryan and Melissa receive because of my discretion stops today. Charles hesitated. Do you want me to notify them? No. A letter explaining why? No. I stood. They asked for space, Charles. I'm not turning this into a fight. By that afternoon, the first consequence arrived without me saying another word. My phone displayed an automated trust notification. A substantial transaction had been attempted against one of the household accounts. DCLND. I recognized the vendor. Ryan and Melissa had been planning an expensive renovation to their house. Apparently, the deposit was supposed to come from the trust-funded account. I closed the notification. 20 minutes later, another alert appeared. Then another. I didn't respond. Ryan had told me not to reach out. So I didn't. At 6:12 p.m., an unfamiliar number called. I let it ring. At 6:19, another number appeared. Then a third. By 9 o'clock, my voicemail inbox was filling. Apparently, Ryan had discovered his own number was blocked. I placed the phone face down and made myself dinner. At midnight, I checked it once. 27 missed calls. 3 different numbers. Less than 24 hours earlier, my son had told me never to contact him again. Now he couldn't stop trying to contact me. By breakfast, the number had changed. 109 missed calls. Ryan. Melissa. Numbers I recognized from relatives who hadn't remembered my birthday. And several I didn't recognize at all. The family that had been completely silent when my son told me to disappear had apparently found their phones overnight. One voicemail from Ryan began, "Dad, you need to fix this immediately." I deleted it. Another came from Melissa. "This has gone way too far. Call us." That one almost made me laugh. They had asked me not to call them. Now I was somehow doing something wrong by obeying. I didn't return any of the messages. That afternoon, I attended an extended family lunch that had been arranged weeks earlier. Ryan and Melissa weren't there, but apparently their version of the story had arrived before I did. My sister-in-law, Diane, confronted me before I had even taken my seat. "Gilbert, you cannot punish those children because your feelings got hurt." I stopped pulling out my chair. "What children?" "Your grandchildren. Ryan told us you cut the family off financially." Around the table, several people suddenly became very interested in my answer. "The children's education accounts haven't been touched." Diane frowned. "What?" "Not $1. I looked around the table. The only discretionary payments I suspended were payments benefiting 2 adults named Ryan and Melissa. Silence. My nephew finally asked, "Then why did Ryan say the kids were being affected?" "That would be a question for Ryan." Diane's expression changed. I sat down. Then another question occurred to me. How did everyone even know about the distributions? My cousin Andrew looked uncomfortable. "Melissa called people this morning." "Why?" Nobody answered immediately. Then Andrew lowered his voice. "They were expecting money this week." That got my attention. "What money?" "For the house." He explained that Ryan and Melissa were preparing to refinance their property while beginning a major renovation. They had apparently been counting on an upcoming trust distribution as part of their financial picture. Without it, everything had become considerably more complicated. Suddenly, those 109 calls made sense. My birthday message hadn't created urgency. The declined payments had. I pushed my chair back. "Gilbert," Diane said, "where are you going?" "Home. You should at least talk to Ryan. He specifically asked me not to reach out." I left before the lunch became a public argument. I had barely reached the parking lot when Charles called. "Gilbert, are you somewhere private?" "I'm outside. What happened?" "I've been reviewing the old trust correspondence." I stopped beside my car. "Why?" "Because something about yesterday bothered me." Paper rustled on his end. "I found an email Melissa sent months ago. At the time, it seemed like a routine question about distributions." "And now?" Charles went quiet for a second. "Now I think you need to see what your daughter-in-law wrote about keeping you financially useful." 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from Charles with Melissa's email between us. "Read this part," he said. I looked where he pointed. Melissa had contacted the trust office months earlier, asking whether Ryan's distributions would continue automatically in the event of personal disagreements or reduced contact with Gilbert. I read the sentence twice. "She asked this months ago." Charles nodded. "At the time, it wasn't alarming. Families ask about trust terms constantly. We gave her general information." Then he placed another document beside it. This came from Ryan. Ryan had separately asked whether I could personally suspend discretionary distributions. Suddenly, the birthday message looked different. They hadn't necessarily rejected me because of money. But long before telling me to stay away, they had investigated whether they could distance themselves from me without losing it. "They thought the payments were guaranteed," I said. "Apparently." Charles opened the trust agreement. "Ryan seems to believe your late wife created an irrevocable arrangement covering these household distributions." "But she didn't." "No. My wife had helped establish the family trust, but the core estate and my voluntary lifetime distributions were different things." Charles tapped the relevant provision. "You retain discretion over these payments while you're alive." That misunderstanding explained the panic. Ryan and Melissa apparently believed they could remove Gilbert Lawson from their lives while keeping Gilbert Lawson's checkbook. And now reality was arriving quickly. Charles had already received notices related to their household accounts. The renovation deposit had failed. Without the discretionary trust income, their refinance application would need to be reconsidered. The vehicle payment was now Ryan's responsibility. And the monthly household transfer wasn't coming. When I returned home that evening, I found an envelope wedged beneath my front gate. Ryan's handwriting was on the front. I opened it inside. "Dad, you misunderstood what I meant. We need to talk immediately. This is affecting our house, our financing, and commitments we already made." Most of the first page concerned the trust. Near the bottom, Ryan finally wrote, "I don't want this to destroy our relationship." I stared at that sentence. The night before, the relationship had apparently been disposable. Now that the money was gone, it needed saving immediately. I called Charles. "I'll meet them." "Are you sure?" "Yes, but I want you there." 2 days later, Ryan and Melissa entered Charles's conference room. Ryan didn't sit. "You need to restore those payments." "Not hello, Dad." "Not I'm sorry about your birthday." "Not even I shouldn't have sent that message." "Just the payments." Charles calmly opened the trust documents. Ryan pointed toward them. "We were told Mom established this for the family." "She did establish part of the trust structure," Charles said. "That does not make every distribution irrevocable." Melissa leaned forward. "You can't just change everything because of a private disagreement." I looked at her. "You seemed comfortable making that private disagreement public in the family group." Her face tightened. Ryan interrupted. "Dad, that's not the point. We already committed money based on these distributions. Charles started explaining the discretionary provisions, but Ryan talked over him. We've got contractors waiting. The bank needs updated documentation. You can't suddenly. I reached into the folder Charles had prepared. Then I slid one printed page across the table. Melissa stopped talking. Her eyes dropped to it. She recognized it immediately. It was the email she had sent months before asking whether they could reduce contact with me while the money continued. Melissa stared at the email for several seconds without touching it. Ryan looked from her to me. What is that? Charles answered before she could. Correspondence your wife sent to the trust office several months ago. Ryan picked it up. His eyes moved down the page. Melissa finally spoke. I was asking a financial question. I know, I said. There was nothing wrong with asking. I didn't say there was. That seemed to unsettle her more than an accusation would have. Charles placed Ryan's earlier inquiry beside it. And this one came from you. Ryan recognized his own message immediately. He leaned back. We were trying to understand our financial future. That's reasonable, I said. What isn't reasonable is believing you can plan a future without me, while continuing to plan it with my money. Ryan's jaw tightened. We never said we wanted you out of our lives forever. I took out my phone. I still had a screenshot of his birthday message. I placed it on the table. We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore at all. Underneath it was Melissa's thumbs-up reaction. Tell me what part I misunderstood. Neither of them answered. That was when the truth finally became impossible to avoid. Ryan and Melissa had been thinking about reducing contact with me long before my birthday. Maybe they found me inconvenient. Maybe my presence came with expectations they no longer wanted. They were entitled to feel that way. But months earlier, they had also started checking whether distancing themselves from me would affect their distributions. They believed my late wife had structured everything so that the money was essentially guaranteed. They were wrong. Charles opened the trust agreement. Certain assets are protected for future beneficiaries, he explained, but Gilbert retains authority over discretionary lifetime distributions. Melissa looked at him. So he can just stop them? Yes. Ryan turned toward me. So you're cutting us off because I asked for space? No. I kept my voice level. You asked me to stop participating in your life. I pointed toward the documents. I finally stopped. Ryan stood. What about the kids? Their education accounts remain fully funded. His expression changed. Melissa looked sharply at Charles. Is that true? Completely. Their school money. Untouched. That mattered to me. My grandchildren had not written that message. They were not responsible for their parents' decisions, and I wasn't going to use their futures as leverage. Only the voluntary support going directly toward Ryan and Melissa's lifestyle had ended. I looked at my son. You told the family I was hurting your children. Ryan glanced away. I was angry. You called relatives who couldn't remember my birthday because suddenly you needed them to remember I existed. Dad. No, listen. For once he did. I wasn't devastated because you forgot my birthday. People forget dates. What hurt was what happened afterward. I picked up my phone. When I told my family I felt forgotten, my son told me not to contact him anymore. Your wife approved the message, and then both of you apparently expected $14,000 to continue arriving every month. Melissa lowered her eyes. Ryan sat down again. I shouldn't have sent it. It was the first apology I had heard. I was frustrated. Melissa and I felt like we needed boundaries. You're allowed boundaries. I didn't mean forever. Then you shouldn't have written any more at all. He had no answer for that. After a moment, Ryan asked quietly, Can we start over? I wanted to say yes immediately. That was the old habit. Ryan withdrew, and I rushed forward. Ryan struggled, and I opened my wallet. Ryan became distant, and I tried to purchase my way back into his life. Not anymore. We can try to rebuild, I said, but the payments aren't coming back. Melissa looked up. Even if we repair things. Especially then. I wanted a relationship with my son that could survive without a monthly transfer attached to it. The consequences were immediate. Ryan and Melissa canceled the renovation. They reorganized their household expenses and took over the vehicle payments I had been covering. Their original refinancing plan fell apart without the discretionary trust income they had been counting on. Months later, they refinanced based on what they actually earned. The family pressure disappeared too. Once everyone learned my grandchildren's education funds had never been touched, the story about a vindictive grandfather became difficult to maintain. Some relatives apologized. Others simply stopped calling. Either was fine with me. Ryan and Melissa faced a harder question from the family. Why had everyone been summoned to defend them only after the money stopped? For several months, I maintained the distance Ryan originally requested. Eventually, he started calling again. At first, I was cautious. But something changed. He stopped asking about distributions. We talked about ordinary things. Sometimes he brought the children over. Sometimes we had coffee. There was no dramatic moment where everything suddenly became perfect. Trust doesn't return because somebody finally says sorry. It returns when their behavior stays different after the consequences remain. I also sat down with Charles and revised my estate plan. Future inheritance would be clearly separated from voluntary support during my lifetime. Nobody would ever again confuse access to my money with entitlement to me. A year passed. On my 68th birthday, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, Ryan was standing there with my grandchildren. One of them carried a homemade cake that leaned slightly to one side. "Grandpa, we made it." I laughed. "I can see that." Ryan smiled awkwardly. "Happy birthday, Dad." There was no conversation about the trust. No request for money. No discussion about inheritance. We simply went inside. Things between us were not what they had once been. Maybe they never would be. But when I looked around that table, I understood something I should have learned years earlier. I didn't need to finance my place in my own family. The people sitting there were there because they had chosen to come. Ryan had asked his father for space, and I gave it to him. But those 109 missed calls proved they had never expected my money to leave with me.